Congresswoman Fedorchak, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, David. I appreciate the invitation. And if it's possible for you to just call me Julie today, I'd be happy for that too.
I'll try, but I've never got to talk to a congresswoman before, and I've been walking around my house for the last 3 days calling everybody congresswoman. So we'll see how it goes. It's a lot better than if I called everybody Julie, since nobody in my house is named Julie. So
that would be kind of confusing, yes.
Hey, before we dive into my questions, I don't think anybody knew before we had this arranged. I actually, when I was a kid, got to live in a little town called Cavalier, North Dakota.
Wow.
Yeah, so we moved
Lucky
there.
You.
It was, honestly, I was there in 4th and 5th grade, I want to say. My dad worked for IBM, and he was part of a program that was part of the Over the Horizon Missile Defense Program. And so
Yes.
IBM had a group up there, and it was absolutely a blast. Our neighbors owned the local little Articat shop, and it was, but we did discover one truth of the North that we didn't know when you grew up in California and the South, and that is there's a certain point in the winter where if you bump into a flagpole with just your skin, you're going to stick to it.
Yes.
Who knew? There should
Well,
be a
the
public
famous
service.
the famous scene in Toy Story, no, Christmas Story, right?
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yikes.
Well,
Yeah.
enough about that. Hey, we ask everybody that comes on the show, because to get to data centers or critical infrastructure usually is an unlikely path. And I got to believe public service is similar. So before we dive into AI and energy, how did you get into public service, starting there in North Dakota and now in Congress?
Well, obviously, this was not a path that, for me, it wasn't something that I chose. It sort of chose me, I think. I was in college and studied journalism and was just about ready to work for a newspaper. Times were tough. There weren't very many jobs. I had an internship. I got offered a full-time job someplace else in public relations. So then I took my first curveball in my career. Then shortly thereafter, I was working actually out in Washington, D.C. At a university, and the governor of our state tracked me down and through his chief of staff and invited me to be his communications director. We had crossed paths on a previous project, and I guess he liked my work, and he offered me a job to be his communications director and move back to North Dakota, which I chose to do. And then in that process, realized I really love public policy and came to appreciate how much it impacts people and everyday lives. Even as a 20-year-old, I could appreciate how big of a deal government is in the lives of everybody, even if you don't realize it or don't want to admit it. So I worked for 7 years for him. He was a very amazing leader, somebody very approachable, very common sense, no nonsense. Didn't take himself too seriously. And so it was a wonderful experience. Then after that, I thought I need to work in the private sector for a bit. So I had my own business for 10 years, a consulting business, did a lot of communications, marketing, just lobbying, all kinds of different things. And then after that, I kind of missed it. I missed public policy. I missed the meaning in work and it having kind of a bigger purpose. And so I raised my hand when Senator John Hoeven was elected to the Senate, said, hey, I'd be interested in getting back into public service. They hired me as their state director. And then after that, an opening came open at the Public Service Commission in my state. I thought I'd been working for people for a while. Maybe I should try to do this public service thing on my own. And so I raised my hand for that and got appointed and then was elected 3 times statewide and served for 12 years in that role. That really is where I cut my teeth in the energy policy issue. Fascinating industry that I'm excited to talk about. And then from there, it seemed a logical step to raise my hand one more time and run for Congress and see what kind of a difference I could make on the Hill with my energy experience. So that's what led me here. And I'm really honored and super excited to be here at this time, at these moments where we're dealing with so many consequential issues and so many important energy related issues. I'm excited to be here and put my expertise to work.
Well, we are for sure going to dive into that, but a little unscripted, but I'm going to comment. One of the things that I love, especially when I get guests on here, the steps may be different, the circumstances of their journey may be different, But when we get to meet people that raise their hand and say, I want to serve, whether it's policy, whether it's, you have formal constituents like you do, or just your customers, whatever it is, and you want to help people find a way to come together for the common good, for human flourishing, it's amazing. And I'm so glad to hear your story. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Appreciate
Hopefully we
your
get to hear
appreciation.
more. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Hey, let me ask you this. So talking about energy, we're all talking about energy. How's your work there in North Dakota shaping how you approach things in D.C.?
Well, I had a front row seat on one of the most significant periods in my state's history, where the Bakken was discovered. Well, it wasn't discovered. We knew it was there, but the technology to develop it and bring the amazing fruits of the Bakken forward for American people really happened. And being at the front seat of that really dynamic time in my state taught me so many things. The Public Service Commission, we didn't permit the oil and gas development, but we do permit so many things, or yeah, they do, and I did permit so many things associated with it that were essential to fully realizing the potential of the Bakken, and that is all the infrastructure necessary to support that industry. Some of them being the pipelines, the natural gas and the crude oil takeaway pipelines. We regulated the rail safety, which for a while was a really big deal because that's how a bulk of the product was being shipped out of our state, was by rail. And we also permitted, oversee, and regulate the development, the growth of construction of new energy or power generation, and all the power transmission lines, and all the gas processing facilities. So many of the resources necessary to support the development and really allow it to flourish, and quite honestly, do so in a way that has minimal impact, the least impact to the people around and who have to live with this industry. And so seeing that and seeing how it's really counter to how a lot of the folks who don't live with this, I would say a lot of the environmental groups who are out of state that aren't involved in living side by side with the industry, they're opposing pipelines. Pipelines are the best, most efficient, most environmentally friendly way to transport this product. Without them, you have trucks across the road and you have trains across the tracks. And so in helping to develop that pipeline infrastructure was a key to making this industry sustainable and to helping it be tolerable to the people who are living with that development. The power generation also essential. You can't produce energy without having a lot of energy to support that production. Right. So it takes a lot of power to produce energy, and so allowing for and helping to support that development and doing it in a way that was fast. Like, we permitted things quickly, but we didn't cut corners. We stuck to timelines. We had transparency. We were thorough. We held the companies to high standards. But when they met the standards of the law, we gave them the permit, and that was that. And so I just have that kind of an appreciation for just the common sense approach to regulation, oversight, permitting that I think we need to bake into federal law, and I think we can. And I'm really excited to put that experience, both on the power generation side and the permitting side, to use in DC, because I think it's very, very timely right now to all the big discussions that are happening.
I love that conversation. In data centers, we're having conversations with people, and when you get some information, because you're concerned about your world, that seems to confront, whether it's an industry like ours or energy production or whatever, but it's incorrect, and you want to come alongside. And what we're hoping people just be curious. Bring your objections, that's okay, but bring curiosity and an open-mindedness, and let's sit down and reason together and see if it's factually true or if it's not true, and how can we do it? And I got to believe that all of your experience, not just in policy there in the state and now in Washington, but in communication and getting together with people, doing, whether it's a podcast like this or just sitting down with not just your constituents, but the broader group, let's reason together. And what we find is, man, we can find so much common ground because we want to flourish. We need energy sovereignty. We need connectivity. You can't be connected to the modern world if you're not connected to those things.
Absolutely. Only the real diehards who are 100% committed to a certain end goal or a policy, those
Right.
folks, I never made a lot of progress with them, but
Hmm.
I can't tell you how many times we went into a hearing with members of the public who had one idea about how things were. And then after sitting through the hearing, it takes some time, but after sitting through the hearing, listening to us ask questions, listening to us grill the companies,
Hmm.
realizing like, oh, this isn't a rubber stamp. They actually do care. They actually do know what they're talking about. They actually are asking really good questions. They're asking the questions I wanted to know. And oh, listen, there are answers to this, and it isn't what I thought it was. And so I time and again, I would walk away from those hearings from members of the pub, and members of the public would come up to me and say, "Thank you for doing your job. Thank you for the focus to detail. This isn't what I expected it to be."
Right.
And they feel more comfortable with it. So yeah, I think most good-hearted people you can reason with and find common ground.
Right.
I think the folks you can't are in the minority. They're
Yeah.
out there, but they're in the minority. They might be the loudest, though.
They are. They frequently are. Um, Let me ask you this. So recently, you launched an AI and energy group in Congress, and why this is important to me. First of all, what uh, interesting, we have a lot of people in the energy space come on our podcast. Whether it doesn't matter what the generation type is, or maybe even utility. They might be involved in distribution or transmission, but they're in and around this space. And a number of them reached out to me, a lot of them in the nuclear space, national labs, said, hey, have you seen this RFI? Have you seen some of these other things? So you've launched this AI and energy group in Congress. I guess my question is, why now? And what do you hope it's going to achieve?
Well, two things. The only other better time to have done this would have been 2 years ago.
Right.
So, but the next best time is right now. And so it was absolutely, I think, vital to have some formal group like this working to bring together both sides of this equation. We know the AI industry is desperate for power. I heard it for the last 2 years very seriously in my last role as president of the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners, NARUC. That's the national group of basically state regulators, energy nerds who are assigned in their daily job to make sure that there's enough power to meet the demand of their customers in the state. And
Hmm.
we saw this growing need from that perspective. And there was a lot of efforts on that in that world to kind of bring together the AI and the regulators and the policymakers. Here's an opportunity on a national scale because our national energy policy has a significant impact on the types of resources we're seeing come to the grid and the speed at which they're able to do so. And so we know we need a lot of power. We know we need it quickly. How are we going to do that? And it seemed just really logical. And my team brought this idea to me. And I was like, yes, this is a brilliant idea. Let's
Mm.
do this. It allowed us to kind of be helpful to the overall cause of our conference, the Republican conference, who's really hard at work on the reconciliation process. That can move forward. That's largely leadership. The chairman of committees are really spearheading that. I'm not one of them right now, but I do have this expertise. So let's use that expertise to bring together these important stakeholders and learn from them. What is the need? What are the barriers? What kind of policy solutions can we bring forward to address those needs and erase those barriers and help us succeed in outpacing China in making sure that the AI technology is developed and homegrown in the US. And so that's our goal, is to get through that process in a relatively quick manner, bringing together these two sides and others. And there might be 3 or 4 sides. I don't know how many sides we'll
Yeah.
see as we go through this, but largely I see it as a power providers and a power users issue. And how can we break down the barriers? And that's kind of what our goal is, to bring forward policies to do that.
One of the things I love, I don't know if it's an unintended consequence, but we have a lot of sort of adjacent industries that we talk to. They're not spot on data center and data centers or centers of data. We host not just AI, but the Fortune 2000 infrastructure, the cloud services, the e-commerce, the whatever. Basically, the modern life, right? Everything on your phone lives in a secure data center. But if we want to reshore manufacturing, if we want to shore industry, if we want to reshore factory, any of these things, and we want it to be long-term, get it sustainable and, making our own steel or aluminum or all of these ideas, energy, not just for artificial intelligence, which is spectacularly important. I agree with you. We for sure want to be the leaders in that space. The idea of any nation state that is not friendly to us leading that could, we don't even know what the consequences are. I'm not a fear monger, but we need to lead in those spaces. One of the things I loved about the proposals that I've seen that your group has put out is how inclusive it is. We're reaching to community. We're reaching to business. We're reaching to industry across the aisle. We're reaching even to those people who have said, we'll never consider a pipeline or a conversation. We want to make it available. We want to be transparent. I know we spoke about this a little bit, but if there were a couple things specifically you want to hear as it relates to whether it's AI, data, infrastructure from the world, or maybe even the people that are in that world, what are the couple things you'd really like to hear from us?
Well, this is an area where I've tried to be really careful. I don't want to walk into this with a preconceived idea about what the solutions are. Obviously, David, I've worked in this industry for 12 years. I have some ideas of my own. I know we have permitting challenges. I know we have supply chain issues. I know we're retiring things faster than we're replacing them. I don't believe our incentive structure is appropriate and I don't think it's helping us bring forward the kind of technologies that we need the most. And you're seeing, some of my initial policy solutions already coming forward in terms of I proposed to phase out the incentive structure for solar and wind, because I think those technologies are proven. They're already widely available on the market, in the market. And I don't think those incentives are helping us bring forward the new technologies encouraging investment in those new technologies that are not proven yet. And that's where we should be spending our federal dollars. So that's one solution that I think is important. But I want to hear from the experts on what are the barriers, and I might be surprised by them. I heard an idea in an Energy and Commerce Committee hearing a couple weeks ago I can't even remember what the topic of the hearing was, but it was very applicable to this. One expert suggested using third parties to pre-approve areas for development to federal standards, to federal permitting standards. That's brilliant. I don't know what the barriers are to doing that, but we should be doing that. We should have been doing that all along, allowing third parties to kind of act like federal agencies and look at these standards and review them and prepare ground for development. The companies can pay for it, and then that could save 6 years. I mean, that could save the infinite amount of time, and all at the dime of the company that has the vested interest in getting these things done quickly. And those are the costs that should rest on their shoulders. So I love those kinds of innovative solutions. I know there's tons of them out there. I can't begin to predict what they are, but those are the types of things we want to hear from the industry to bring forward to get this power, get the facilities up and running as quickly as possible. Because I would argue, yes, there is, power demand. We need it for everything. It is essential. Reliable, affordable power is essential to our national security. But this AI race, this is a national security issue.
It is.
The last thing we want is for China to be the driver of AI. We do not want this tool, them leading the way with a tool like this, to use at will to further their advancement of, oppression,
Hmm.
tyranny,
Yeah.
not freedom of, opposite uh, of freedom, control, not allowing free speech. I mean, all of these things are the opposite of what we want, and we do not want China having this powerful tool to use it against us and any other country that supports freedom and democracy. So we have to win this race. It is very essential. So we got to get about it and get our policies in line to help us do that.
I, I, I completely agree that whoever's going to be the leader, second place is so distant from first place,
Mm-hmm.
and it's difficult for people to kind of get their head around that. And when you can leverage a tool, any tool, not for flourishing, but to impact liberty and opportunity that the world's that's striving for, it's best opportunity for success for yourself. It's if we're not going to rally around those sorts of things, what as a free people are we going to rally around? I completely agree. But one of the consequences, at least in our world, that's happening. We're kind of alluding to this earlier. There's misinformation in the world. You know, when some people hear AI, what they think is you're coming to take all of my natural resources, or this thing's going to impact my world, or whatever. And so we communities are pushing back because they've heard activist voices or they hear these things. And I'm not saying let's not receive, like we were saying before, receive the concern. Absolutely, I don't. But what's your advice? You have both in public and private workspace, you've helped counsel people on whether it's industry or communities on how to sit down and have a conversation together. What's your advice to our industry on working with communities to get local support?
You absolutely, that is so vital. And you have to, a lot of times companies, the mistakes I've seen companies make are when they try to kind of sneak in and do things sort of under the radar because they don't
Mm-hmm.
want to alert people or alarm people, et cetera, et cetera. That is absolutely the wrong approach. I've also seen companies in my state come in, they hire out of state folks. They don't have respect for the locals. They think that they know better. They
Mm.
assume that the locals are dumb.
Right.
and and they pay the price.
Mm-hmm.
They pay the price very, very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a high price when you go about things that way. So you have to engage early. You have to get with the local leaders, and you have to come to them earnestly with a sincere respect,
Mm-hmm.
appreciation for the fact that this is their community. This is where these people live. This is where they raise their children. And they will be there long after you are.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to get their support and treat them right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's cheaper in the end to treat them right than to cut corners. You're going to suffer in terms of permitting and costs of land and everything else if you aren't a good neighbor and a good partner on the front end. So coming in early, working with the locals, hiring local people to help you is also very vital. If you're hiring land agents, make sure that those land agents are from the state and know the culture and know how to approach people with things like their private property rights,
Right.
which, in rural areas, those people hold dear to those things.
Yeah.
So I think those are some of the biggest important first steps. Then once you're trusted, you have the opportunity to teach them the facts, and people
Mm-hmm.
will listen to you and trust that what you're saying is right. There's a lot of misconceptions about this industry. One bad experience taints, like we had one bad experience in Western North Dakota early on, and literally I heard about it in the farthest corner. The bad experience was in Williston, North Dakota, northwest North Dakota, like 3 or 4 years ago. I was in Wahpeton, North Dakota, southeast corner of North Dakota, 7 hours from
Mm.
Williston. And we heard about it in a meeting just this last week about the concerns about AI. And some of them are noise and some are this and power scarcity and driving local power prices up. So when you make mistakes on the first project, you're going to pay for those long term, and you're going to have to. It's going to be a lot harder to make up for that. So making sure you do it right at the beginning, and then coming in and being armed with the facts and assuring people, and then make sure that you're not ever lying, because if you
Right.
say something and the opposite comes true, then you're not going to be trusted again. So those are just basics. It's how you deal with human beings in general. But for some reason, people think when, a lot of out of state, like coastal folks come in and want to work with a rural America, the heartland, and they assume people are dumb. And that's a really, really bad, bad
Yeah.
assumption, and it's going to cost you dearly.
It it always does. It's crazy, and I love what you said in our world, kind of the way we think about it. Almost exactly that. And we're a group in our industry. I'm the exception. A bunch of introverted energy nerds, IT nerds, like that. But we've had to develop a skill of coming in, almost being whimsical, being curious. Not just because we can doesn't mean necessarily that you just look, we've got, we own, this is our thing. Absolutely not. That's 100% the wrong way. And what we've learned over time is you share information, whether it's your professor, it's your pastor, or whatever. You share information from a stage or from a pulpit or a lectern, but you build community, you build relationship in a circle. You build it at the lab bench, you build it in your small group, you build it in the town hall. And you get to know people, and you get to have those intimate, informal conversations and really get to know. And even if they don't completely agree, they will learn to trust that you're factual, you're truthful, and it gives you the best opportunities for success. At least that's how we do it here. We've been trying to do that. And I love your advice because it seems to resonate right along that path.
And
I know yeah.
there's some great opportunities here for partnerships like AI. The investors in these projects typically have, sizable resources that can be super beneficial to the areas and the communities. So identifying what those issues are, like Allied, I keep forgetting the name of the big investor in Edgeley, North Dakota, but they are Applied Digital, sorry. They have come in and built in that community. They started with crypto. They're going into AI. They're expanding significantly, and they have helped that community address land issue or road issues and housing issues that were vital to that community. So it can be a mutually beneficial partnership where people are embracing them now, when at first they were kind of concerned and a little bit skeptical. So
Yeah.
in the end, it can be a win-win and should be a win-win.
Right. Well, we got to get you on a plane in just a few minutes. So I just got a couple questions left.
Sure.
Let me ask you this. When you think about data centers or other critical infrastructure bringing their own power, there's a lot of conversation about on-site generation. And there's been some misinformation about, well, we don't need the public utilities, which I absolutely think that is the wrong thing. It'll be a collaboration. How do you think about on-site generation? What does that look like in a relation as it relates to utilities across the United States? How do you think we should be thinking about this to help us scale up to meet the, we need the energy to solve, to deliver on AI and all these other things we've talked about today?
Absolutely. This is an area where I hope we make some progress in our conversations with the power providers and the power users, because I have been advocating for the last few years that we need on-site generation. If we're going to build at the speed of need, we have to be able to do it in stages. And this is not how the utility industry works. They don't do things quickly. It is intentionally a slow, deliberate industry. It's why it attracts that kind of investors. The regulatory structure is very long and kind of cumbersome, so it doesn't facilitate quick movement. So we have to do it different than how we've provided and met the power needs of past development. I think you have to go in stages. Let the companies do the on-site generation. Like in North Dakota, we have a huge opportunity. We're flaring gas. Because we're maxed out in our pipeline capacity. Let's let these facilities locate near a gas pipeline. Let's let them generate their own power near that gas line, gas power generation. Get up and running. And then over time, do the studies to connect to the grid and work with, whether it's the co-op or the investor-owned utility who's located in that area, to be a customer, work through the tariffs and all of the issues needed to become part of that system. Those things happen. They take many, many, many months or years to accomplish that. And so I think we can and should embrace this in stages and allow some sort of unconventional approaches on the initially, just to meet this need and get it done quickly. So I'm a big fan of it, of on-site generation.
Last question, two-parter. Paradise is carbon-free, unlimited power, highly dense. So people might be thinking about microreactors, SMRs, traditional nuclear power. If that's what paradise looks like at some time in the future, we got to eat on the way to paradise. So my question for you is two-parter. What do you think those short-term options as we grow, whatever they look like, are? And then the second is 2 years from now, when we have this conversation again, what do you hope Congress and you can point to as real progress from the groups you've got started now and maybe some of the future initiatives you have in mind?
So is the first question, what technologies do I think are going to win the day?
The short term as we move towards
Sure.
the next 5 to 10 years.
So short term, the technologies that we need to embrace are the ones that are already connected to the grid. We have to stop retiring things that are already up, connected and working. That's step number one. And get as much as we possibly can with efficient new technologies like grid enhancing technologies, dynamic line ratings, all of those sorts of technologies that are just at our fingertips. We need to deploy them quickly, and along with the resources that are already connected to the grid, maximizing the efficiency of those, maximizing their outputs, extending their life, doing all those things, and see what we can get from that. That's step number one. That's just like a no-brainer. That is the low-hanging fruit. Then we need to make sure that our incentives are aligned correctly to bring forward the other fast acting technologies that meet this need. Wind and solar don't meet this need because they aren't available 100% of the time. This is these resources operate 24/7. So you have to have dispatchable resources that can function under all weather conditions. And so that's just the reality of this. That is not a statement of I oppose wind and solar. It's just a technology reality. So what do we need to do to bring those forward? I'm hearing we have shortages of gas processing, not gas processing. We have shortages of gas turbines. So how can we incentivize U.S. production of gas turbines? How do we get more gas turbines to help meet that need? Because that's the most logical, quick constructing deployable resource. These other technologies like SMRs also get proven. We need to reduce the permitting time for the nuclear resources. David Wright is already working on that. I've met with him. I think that we'll get some ideas through the working group from them on what sorts of additional tools they need, and we can bring forward as policy ideas, and those should get bipartisan support. So bring forward those, permit nuclear as quickly as we can, and get those technologies proven. I think that will probably be the new technology that wins the day. But there's others that have a great promise too. If we can bring the battery technology and get it to be more than a 4-hour commercial scale battery, to be an 8-hour or 16-hour, that's a more realistic, and prove those technologies, then you've got a new day with the wind and solar resources that are already on the grid. We can store them and use them. Pumped hydro has huge potential. We've got a lot of hydro dams. How can we get more output out of those? So there's incredible resources just on the horizon. I think carbon capture and storage in places like North Dakota hold huge promise. I support, helping those technologies develop and be proven. So we're just on the verge, but the one thing we need is patience. And patience means using the existing resources that have become, in some people's eyes, really unpopular like coal, but I'm here to tell you, China's using coal, India's using coal. That's how they're going to win this race if they win. And so what good is it if we're shutting ours down, if they're building, 3 times as many as we're shutting down on a monthly basis? That is just not strategically smart. So let's use ours, let's win this race, and then let's deploy AI to help us develop the new technologies that will solve this problem long term, not only for us, but for the rest of the globe. That's the winning strategy that I think should be bipartisan and hopefully will ultimately win the day for us and help us to maintain our national security advantage that is needed in the U.S.
So what are you going to write on your whiteboard 2 years from now that says, we're making progress? What's the key indicator that you think is going to be that thing or things?
Well, I think that is the investment of the AI processing facilities in the U.S., like being able to see where are they, talking with those big investors. Were they able to meet their need here in the U.S. and actually build their facilities and make the U.S. their home? I think that's the ultimate success story that we need. And we'll see. I think we'll be, in 2 years, we'll know whether we're on the right track or not.
I completely agree. Congresswoman Fedorchak, thank you so much for coming on the show today. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate the invitation, and I appreciate all that you guys are doing to help educate the public and get the word out and promote the need for real bipartisan solutions on this very important policy challenge that we're facing.
It's our great pleasure. Safe travels today. Hope you have a good one.